Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be indexing U.S. obituaries, and together we'll walk through step by step how to index a U.S. obituary. First though, I'd like to go to the FamilySearch.org blog. This is a great resource, a great source of information about how to index, specifically how to index obituaries. So if you go to FamilySearch.org, scroll to the bottom, click on blog. It'll take you to the Family Search's blog site. You want to go ahead and search for this phrase, indexing obituaries just got easier. Now this was a blog post that was posted back in 2014. It's about a year old, but again, it's a great resource. I highly recommend that you read it. Here we'll go ahead and just click on that article and quickly skim through this. Now in this blog post, there's actually 3 links. The first one is the in-depth guide to indexing obituaries. This is a great source of information. As we pull it up, you'll notice that it is fairly long. There's 36 pages, but it's large type, large font, so it's a very quick read. The great thing about it is it gives you a lot of information about how to index. It walks you through examples. It will answer a lot of the questions you have when you index. So I would highly recommend reading through that and refer to it as you index. The next one is the 12 vital hints of indexing U.S. obituaries. Again, very quick read, only 12 little bullet points there. Quickly read through that. Is highly recommended. The next is the indexing obituaries FAQ. Again, very quick. Quick read, highly recommended you read that. Now that we've sort of gone through some of the preparation that we would want to go through before we start indexing U.S. obituaries, let's go ahead and start indexing. So let's launch the indexing application. Click on Download Batch. We'll want to select a U.S. obituary batch. In this case, I'll select the U.S. Ohio obituaries 1980 through 2014. As this pulls up, first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I can read the obituary. So I want to change the image size. So I want to put that down to about 50. It fits well within my screen because then I don't have to, it's the width of the obituary matches the width of my screen, so it's easy just to scroll up and down. Next, I want to read the project instructions as well as every obituary, just so I understand what I'm doing. But in the interest of saving time, we won't do that today. First thing we want to do is we want to identify the image type for each image. There's 5 images per batch. If you can read the image, you want to identify it as normal. So click on the next image. You want to select the next image type of normal. You can also use the shortcut key N just on your keyboard. It'll change it to N. If you hit Tab, you can go to the next image. So Tab N, you can scroll all the way down and select all the image types. First, within the first image, you want to select the record type. We always want to start with the deceased. So in this case, Miriam is the deceased individual. And we'll want to put Miriam as the given name. Née Perry. Née is French for, I believe, born with or maiden name. It refers to the maiden name of the individual. So in this case, Perry Weinberg is going to be her surname. You put the maiden name first in the surname, and then the married name after her maiden name. As we read through this, we understand that the gender of this individual is female because she's referenced as she. So that's the only way that we can tell if it's a male or female. So we'll want to pull some of that information out. And then continue to record all the other information that is listed, that's being asked for this record, this image. We notice that later on she is referenced as Mrs., so another indication that of her gender of F, as well as a title. So we want to type in MRS, no period. We don't use periods anywhere within Family Search indexing applications, so don't put that period there, and then just go ahead and move on. Now we want to start indexing. After we've entered in all the information of the deceased, we want to start at the beginning of the index of the image again, and we want to index all the other people in order. So in this case, we started with her parents. So we don't know the gender of her parents based on the names. We can't assume gender based on first names, so we just identify both of them as parent. Sister is going to be Edith. that's the relationship of Edith to the deceased. And we know her surname. Sidney and David have a last name of Perry. As it's written here, we know that because there are no other names, and just the way that it is spaced together, first names in commas or and in between them, we can take from that they're going to share the same surname. Now, once we get down to 6 records of that image, we need to go ahead and add new or more records to this image. So we'll go ahead and click on 8 to just add a rough number of 8. In order to quickly move from field to field, use the Tab and Tab Shift keys. Tab to go forward, Tab Shift to go backwards. So that's how I'm going back and forth very quickly. So we want to go ahead and finish up the 3 brothers. Again, they all share the same last name. Grandsons, Alexander. And again, how this is typed out, this is written, Alexander and Brandon share the same last name, Young. Now, if there are any other names or words, if there are any other words in between Alexander and Brandon besides and, then you could not assume that Alexander had the same last name as Brandon or Young. So we would leave that blank. But in this case, we don't have to do that. Now, the husband, Robert, didn't have a last name listed, so we can't assume that. So we blank Robert's last name or surname. You notice that some of the fields, as we're walking through this, some of the field labels or names have an asterisk next to it. That indicates that that field is required. So we need to have some type of value in that. So if the information isn't listed for a required field, you will have to blank that out. And you blank it out by clicking on the X with the small single rectangle underneath it, which is the icon right next to the feather pen in the toolbar. That's how you can blank out a field. You can also use a shortcut key of Command B to blank a field out. So grandchildren, you notice that there is no grandchild-in-law. So David and Jennifer and Kimberly and John, they're all listed as grandchildren. So that's going to be the relationship to the deceased. Need to spell Kimberly correctly. And we'll continue with all the grandchildren. The spouses are identified typically in parentheses. So the spouse of David is Jennifer. The spouse of Kimberly is John. But because they're grandchildren, there's no grandchild-in-law, then they're all listed as grandchild. There is no great-grandchild. So we just would select the grandchild relationship to the deceased as the relationship for the great-grandchildren. Now, Nicholas, Jacob, and Evan, again, how it's typed out, we know that they all share the same name of Weinberg. So we can include Weinberg as the surname for Nicholas and Jacob as well as Evan. We type in the brother Harold and the sister Vivian. Again, their surnames are listed there. We continue to scroll down. We notice that there's another person listed here, Larry. But Larry was actually listed earlier. And we only index names once. So we don't want to re-index Larry. So we're going to go ahead and delete this record. Clicking on the Delete Record button and selecting Yes to continue. Now we notice that we've added one extra record to this image. That image doesn't have any information. I believe that's image number 33. So what we need to do is we need to delete that image. So we'll go ahead and select the Delete Image or Delete Record button and continue. Now we're on the second image. And again, we start with the deceased. So the record type is going to be D. Again, if you just type in D, hit D on the keyboard, it will pull up deceased as the record type. Type in the deceased given name and surnames. Again, née Vale. So we know that her maiden name or her birth name was Vale. So that's going to be the first surname listed, followed by a space, then her married name, which is Pastor. We know that she's the beloved wife. She was the beloved wife. So based on that, we know that her gender is female. So we'd list or type in F for her gender, and then complete the rest of the information. You notice no death date is given, but the publication date can be used for the death date if the death date is not given. So that's what we used in this case. We quickly scroll to see if there's any other information about her death or birth, and there's not. So we go on and we start recording information for all the other people listed in the obituary, starting at the top in order. So Louis Z, there is no surname for Louis. We can't assume that they have the same surname, so we need to blank that out. All of the records, all of the field values or field labels for each record that have an asterisk next to it, that means that it's a required field. So we need to have some type of value there. Jerry is listed after Carol's last name, so we don't know Jerry's last name. We can't assume that it's the same as Carol, so we need to blank that out. Again, Control B to blank out that required field, or you can click on the blank field icon on the toolbar next to the feather pen. So that is going to be the same with Stacy coming up. So Stacy is a grandchild, but we don't know Stacy's last name. So we can't assume that Stacy has the last name of Greg. So we go ahead and blank that out, Control B. And same with Tara. We can't assume Tara's last name is the same as Andy, so we blank that out. Samantha and Sierra, they share the same last name or surname as Pastor, so we can record Pastor as the surname for Samantha. All of these are grandchildren because the deceased is referenced as the grandmother of these individuals. So these individuals are the grandchildren of the deceased. Now, with Jerry, Judy, Betty, and Wilma, we don't know their surnames. And they are the deceased is the sister of them. So they are actually siblings to the deceased. So that's why the relationship is sibling. We don't know their gender. We can't assume gender based on their name. And they don't have any surname. So we blank out the surname and we select sibling as the relationship to the deceased because we don't know their gender. It looks like that's it. We do have one extra record at the end. We want to go ahead and remove that record and go on to the next image. Cynthia Grace. We're going to record Grace as a given name or her middle name because we don't know that that's her maiden name. So if you don't know that it's a maiden name or a surname, record it as a given name. There's no indication in this obituary what the gender of Cynthia is, and we can assume she's female because of her name. So we need to leave the gender blank. As we read through this, we do notice, though, that she is also referenced as Cindy. So that's a nickname that she has. So we'll go ahead and type in or, and then the nickname, or the other name that she's referred to as in the obituary. So or Cindy is what we'll include in the deceased's given names. It looks like that's all of the names listed. There's no other name. So the rest of the records, we need to go ahead and blank those out. So we hit Control B for all of those records. Blank out records 2 through 6 of image number 3. And then we can go ahead and move on to image number 4. Just want to verify that there are no more people listed here. And there isn't. So we'll go ahead and go to image number 4. So again, we start with the deceased. Record type is going to be D for deceased. Her given name, P. Doreen. Last name, Steele. We know that she's female because we did a quick look through the document. We did find some references to she, so we can select the gender. And we type in her death information, her month, day, and year. She was born in Wales, so we want to record that as well. We look for any other information specific to her, and we don't see any. So we'll go on to the next record. So again, we start at the top, and we index each person in order. So the husband, Albert. Albert doesn't have a surname listed, so we need to blank that out because it's a required field. If it's not a required field, like titles or terms, we just skip it. We don't put any information in there. Thomas will have the same name as Tudor, so Thomas Jenkins and Tudor Jenkins are going to be the two brothers. Now she has a son, Brian. So Brian's spouse is Cindy. She is going to be the daughter-in-law to the deceased. Again, we have indexed 6 records, so we needed to add more records to this image. So we go ahead and added 8, and we'll just go ahead and move on and continue indexing all of these names in order. So now we're doing grandchildren. Stephanie Day is a grandchild, and Justin Day. So we add more records. Sarah and Stacy have the same last name because it's written the way that it is. And now Kay is the sister-in-law. And we also notice here that she is referenced, the deceased is referenced as Mrs. So we want to go ahead and scroll all the way up to the top to the deceased record. We want to enter in MRS, that title, as the title of the deceased. Then let's go ahead and go back. I believe we're at record number 12. So we can just go ahead and carry on. As we scroll down, we see if there's any other names listed. We don't have any other names, so we need to go ahead and delete and remove these empty records at the end. So we delete the selected record and click on yes to continue. We do that for all of the empty records at the end. One thing to note, though, that you will notice some funeral homes may have that the name of the funeral home is a person's name. But because that is a business, we don't index that name. So we only index names of individuals, not names of businesses. So this is the 5th and final image of our batch. We'll go ahead and again begin with the deceased. We type in the deceased's given names. And now Ford is going to be her maiden name. So it's going to be Ford DeVita. It's going to be her surname. As we scroll through that, we notice that she is referred to as she, so we can select the gender of F. And we type in the information about her age and her death. Now, if her age wasn't recorded, then we would need to blank that out using Control B or the blank field. We want to blank that field, the blank field button in the toolbar, because it's a required field. Now we just, again, go to the top and start indexing all the other people listed in order. So she is survived by a number of children. Again, we don't know the gender of these children, and we can't assume that based on their first names. So these will all be listed as child or child-in-law. The child-in-laws are going to be those in the parentheses. So the parentheses are going to indicate that that is the spouse of the child. If you've noticed, I like to use the bottom line of the image window as the line that I'm working on. So it's very easy for me to, if I need to take my eyes off of the image, it's very easy for me to find where I was so I'm not skipping names. And I just scroll up one line at a time so I don't miss any information. So we notice there that her mother did have a maiden name of Ruxer. So again, her surname is going to be Ruxer Ford for her mother. So the sisters and brothers-in-law. So Brenda is going to be the sister, and she's going to be married to Danny. So he will be noted as the brother-in-law. Same with Sandra and Randy. We can use the surname listed for Sandra as the same surname listed for Randy. We continue to scroll down and we notice that her father-in-law and mother-in-law are also listed. We can use Davida as the surname of Vincent, as it's written there. It's the same with Gertrude. I want to add a couple more records to this image. We scroll down. Now we start typing in the brother-in-law. So the brother-in-law, Michael Davida. So we notice that the relationship of Marilyn to Michael, typically that would be the sister, but she's not noted as the sister. So we're going to note her as a relative. We know that she's not the sister, otherwise she would have been identified as the sister. But she's the spouse of Michael, so she's still a relative to the deceased. We'll do something similar with Carmen and Cynthia. Carmen is a sister-in-law. She is married to Calvin. Typically that would be the brother, but he's not noted as the brother. But what we want to do is record him as a relative to the deceased. Same with Cynthia. Cynthia is a sister-in-law. She is married to Gary, so Gary will be identified as a relative to the deceased. Now it looks like they have, she has a couple of friends listed there as well, Marcia and Rob. So those are non-relatives, and that's a relationship we will use. Let's go ahead and scroll down. We also see that her father is listed there at the end. As we look a little further, we do notice that there's one more person. There's one more person listed. Looks like Father John. So he's going to be identified as a relationship to the deceased of a non-relative. He is probably the pastor or the father that is performing the ceremony. So we want to include the title, though, of FR, because that's how it's noted. And that's it. Looks like we've got one blank record at the end. We want to go ahead and delete that record. Now that we're done, what we want to do is it's going to ask us to do a quality check. So we scroll through and we say, do we want to do a quality check? Before I do a quality check, I like to double check my work myself. So I select on Field Help, and so I don't have Quality Checker selected. So I check or select Field Help. The reason I do that is because if you have Quality Checker selected and you hit the tab button, the tab key, you'll actually go from field to field that it thinks is incorrect, those fields that show up as red. So you're going to skip a lot of information. What I want to do is I go back to the first image, the first record, and I start scrolling through myself down each field one at a time to just make sure that everything's correct. So I click off of field checker or quality checker and select field help. And then I start at the beginning, record image number one, record number one, and using the tab to move forward one field at a time and shift tab to go back, I start checking my work one field at a time. So here we want to make sure that the names are spelled correctly, that the relationships are correct, that we haven't missed any information. So this just takes us a couple of minutes because we're not doing any typing. We're just really comparing information. We're comparing the image above with the information that we've already typed below. We want to make sure that things are spelled correctly, that the relationship to the deceased is correct. See if we've missed any terms. And it's a great way just to make sure that you are indexing as accurately as you can. So again, there's no great grandchild or children as relationship to the deceased in that drop-down. So we select the closest, and that is going to be grandchild. And Jacob will share the same surname, and Nicholas will share the same surname as Evan, which is Weinberg. We continue to quickly go through field by field using the tab button, the tab key, and we move on. We make sure that we haven't missed any names. We move on to the next image. Again, I believe this only takes 5 to 10 minutes to double check your work, but it is definitely worth it. I have found a couple of mistakes that I do, and I found them through my double checking my work at the end. Again, Lewis doesn't have a surname. A surname isn't listed. So Lewis wouldn't have a surname, so we would blank that out because it is a required field. Again, you can blank out fields that are required by using the Command B shortcut key, or by selecting the X with the small rectangle underneath it in the toolbar, which is right next to the feather pen. Stacy, we can include Stacy's surname because Stacy is listed after Greg's surname. So we blank out the surname of Stacy. And same with Tara. And Jerry, Judy, Betty, and Wilma, they are all siblings to the deceased, so that's why we list them as sibling. We don't know their gender. We can't assume that, so they're all siblings to the deceased, and we don't know their surnames, so all of those need to be blank. Here is Cynthia Grace. Because we don't know if Grace is her maiden name, and it's not indicated there, we would record that as just another given name. We do notice that Cindy is listed below. She's referred to as Cindy below. So we want to include a nickname of Cindy in the given names field. So at the end of her, of Cynthia Grace, we would type in or space Cindy. We don't know her gender. There's no indication of what her gender is in this entire image. So we need to leave the gender blank. Gender is not a required field, so we don't have to blank it out. So we just skip it. There's no value we put in the gender field. Only those fields that have an asterisk next to it are those that are required. And those are the ones that we need to have information in. If the information isn't included in the obituary, then we need to blank that field out by using Control B or selecting the blank field button in the toolbar, which is the X with the rectangle right next to the feather pen. Again, this is a very quick check to see that I haven't missed any information, that all of the spellings are correct, that I've included the any surnames that are appropriate, and the relationships are correct. So again, grandchildren, Stephanie and Justin are grandchildren. They both have the same name, surname of Day. Sarah and Stacy will share the last name Steele, the surname of Steele. And we move on to the fifth and final image of this obituary. So again, her two given names are listed there. Ford is going to be her. That's her maiden name, so we want to include that in her surname. So it's going to be Ford space DeVita. This individual is referenced as she, so we know that, and loving wife, so we know that she's a female. So we'll go ahead and include F as her gender, and then we just start scrolling down line by line. We want to read through the obituary, making sure that all of the names are correct, the spelling is correct, the relationships are correct, and that we haven't skipped or missed any person. We start going through all of the children. Stephanie, the child-in-law, Stephanie's husband is John, so he's going to be recorded as the relationship to the deceased as a child-in-law. Timothy Andrew, again, we don't know if Andrew is a part of the last name, so if we don't know what the last name is, we always record all the names as given name unless we're absolutely sure it's a surname. We record the sisters and brothers-in-law. And the father-in-law and mother-in-law is also recorded there. Now again, this is interesting when we start looking at the brother-in-law. So brother-in-law Michael, looks like I did forget his middle name. So again, really good reason why we want to do this double check at the end. So we want to type in Michael's middle name. We know his surname. And then the spouse of a brother-in-law is typically the sister, but she's not noted as a sister. So he was probably remarried. So Marilyn is just a relative to the deceased. We want to do something similar to Carmen and Cynthia. Carmen and Cynthia are going to be the sisters-in-law, and Calvin and Gary are going to be relatives, identified as relatives to the deceased. Two friends are listed, so they're going to be identified as relationships to the deceased, as a non-relative. And her father is listed. And then again, the father who is performing the ceremony is also listed there as a non-relative, John with the first name, and title of FR, no period. Again, no periods in any of the fields. Now that we're done, we want to do a quick quality check. So this is the official quality check of the indexing application. And again, all of those names, all of those words that are not common, that is not in the common names list that the application has, it's going to be flagged in red, so that field is going to show up red. So that's not saying that you spelt it incorrectly, that it's wrong. It's just saying that this name isn't in the common names list. So just double check. So if we know it's correct, we can go ahead and select accept, or accept all. Accept all if that name is recorded a number of times within that image. We do that for all of the different images. We can go through this very quickly because we already did our own quality check. Once we come to the end, it's going to ask us, do you want to submit your work? Click on yes. Now we'll upload this batch and submit it to the site, and your batch has been successfully submitted and you're done. Click on OK and now completed. Thank you for watching.